So, a lot of crazy stuff is happening around the world. We have the US ordering their allies once again to jump up and down, China isn't happy with Mexico, and the mad ICE raids on Korean factories in the US just happened. And if this isn't a crazy combination of stuff, I don't know what is. We are really caught in Trump's apprentice show, except this time it's global. And the mess with China is about to escalate again. Now, in Trump's latest message to NATO, he has gone off the rails. He has lost patience with Putin, and the words coming out are really extremely irrational. Now, Trump is demanding all NATO nations to stop buying Russian oil and to join the US in sanctioning Moscow. Now, these sanctions refer to secondary tariffs punishing other countries that buy Russian oil. Now, in essence, Trump wants NATO to weaponize their own consumer markets to hammer consumers of Russian oil like India. So, what a glorious mess. In addition, he wants NATO to hit China with a 100% tariff, which is essentially an embargo on Chinese exports. He wants to close off access to EU markets until the Russia-Ukraine war ends. Now, as we mentioned before, if Europe bites, this will be a one-way ticket towards an economic collapse for them. And there are two ways to look at this. Now, firstly, Trump probably knows Europe can't sanction China, and that gives the US an out, and it gives Trump an excuse to sit back and not punish Russia until the EU steps up. Now, another reason is to give Scott Bessent some sense of leverage when he meets China in Spain. Now, they will be talking about trade, TikTok, and of course, Chinese imports from the US. And rare earths will be on the menu. Now, we can also expect semiconductors to be part of the negotiations. The sale of TikTok is another big topic, but let's not forget China holds leverage when it comes to US exports. So Beijing is slowly closing off their markets to US goods. We know this. They are big consumers of food products and they are essentially boycotting US agriculture. And this cutoff is real and is very severe. Now, last September to November, China imported 13 million tons of US soybeans. And that's almost half of total Chinese imports, which shows how free trade used to be, even during the Biden administration. But in the same 3 months this year, China is importing a grand total of zero. US farmers are getting wiped out, and Trump is definitely very angry with Beijing, but yet he can't do anything directly to China's economy. So one can imagine he's trying to use the Europeans to create some invisible leverage that he doesn't even have in the first place. Trump is trying to bluff at a poker table with a pair of threes. Now, of course, China doesn't really care. Beijing has a lot of tricks up their sleeves as well, and they are not afraid to use it. Now, we could talk about rare earths or US bonds, but it goes beyond those. China's next game plan is to cut off perhaps the most important export the US still has to offer. Now, Beijing is beginning to probe the US semiconductor sector, and they are doing it ahead of the talks with Scott Bessent. Now, this anti-dumping probe begins with analog IC chips, basically lower value stuff. But best believe things will escalate all the way to AI chips if the talks in Spain starts breaking down. China really doesn't want the US in a Chinese chip ecosystem. And that takes away revenue from Chinese companies like Huawei. That also leaves the door open for tech dependence. And here's the funny thing. China is turning the table saying that the US unfairly subsidizes their own chip makers, which is quite true by the way. They do get loans and benefits from the US government. So who knows what is really on the table? Maybe China wants unrestricted access for TikTok, or maybe to drop the idea of sanctions for Russian oil. Who knows? But we best believe China is prepped and they are ready to go without US trade. They are starting to shore up their own supply chains that used to be dependent on US imports. Now, soybeans once again is a resource China has stopped depending on the US. They have built a really big buffer, buying 12.3 million tons from Brazil. Look at the huge bump in April when the trade war started, not a coincidence. For the US, it gets even worse. China has booked zero US cargoes for the next year. Maybe it's due to China's own tariffs on the US, or maybe it's a directive from Beijing. Doesn't really matter now. What matters is China becoming less and less dependent on anything US. Ambassador knows this. The administration obviously knows this as well. And that's why the focus has been shifting towards India. So if Trump's dream team can't hammer China, we kind of know who's next on the list. It's going to be India. And Latnik has basically given them a warning. India has to sort themselves out.
India didn't buy Russian oil before the war with Russia and Ukraine. They had 1% of their oil was from Russia. And now 40% of their oil is from Russia because we've sanctioned it so they can buy it, $7, $10 a barrel cheap. So they're buying it, refining it, and then selling it to the rest of the world and making a bundle. So the president called nonsense on that and said, you got to stop that stuff. So I think India will sort it out once they stop buying Russian oil.
So that's on the US side of the fence. Well, the trade war is now spilling over to Mexico. They are planning to side with the US to impose a 50% tariff on Chinese cars. And is this punitive? Most definitely. Chinese exports, including steel and textiles, are going to face a 50% levy as well. It's a huge amount, and it is enough for Mexican consumers or importers to cancel some orders. Now, Mexico is a prime destination for Chinese exporters, and that is now at risk. But a bigger question is for Chinese factories looking to make stuff there. Will the loophole of exporting tariff-free to the US from Mexico be shut down? That is a very big question. And what if Trump threatens the US-Mexico free trade policy? So you can see how disastrous this one move is. It threatens to topple a whole bunch of dominoes which can break Mexico-China relations for quite a bit. And how serious are the Mexican tariffs? Well, they are China's biggest market for car exports. A ton of ICE vehicles and EVs are being exported from Chinese factories all the way to Mexico. Now, in the first half of this year, 280,000 vehicles were sold to the Mexican market. Chinese vehicles are so cheap that even the tariffs might not be able to stem the flow of exports completely. Prices could be still 10 to 20% cheaper than the competitors, even with the tariffs. Now, Beijing has given Mexico a really stiff warning, telling them to think twice. And there's a very classic Chinese expression. It's called 请你三思, which effectively means please think very, very carefully. Well, Mexico's loss will be Brazil's gain. Chinese automakers are already opening assembly plants in Brazil, a BRICS partner. Now, the first EV from BYD has rolled out of the factory. Great Wall Motor is going to expand with a second facility to produce pickup trucks. Chery is partnering with a Brazilian company to produce cars as well. So China will still have a big foothold in the South American market. And because Mexico still needs affordable EVs, production will flow from Brazil upwards to Mexican consumers. It's just a reshuffling of supply chains. Now for Brazil, this is going to be a tremendous advantage. There's going to be a big shift and sharing of technology in the process. And we are talking about AI tech and more importantly, robotics. Now Mexico, if they do insist on punishing Chinese exports, they're going to get punished themselves. And for China, if supply chains get reshuffled to Brazil, it's also going to be a big win for them. If you can have one single hub you can focus on, it's also going to be a prime destination for all your tech exports in the future. When Chinese AI chips catch up, Brazil will be one of the first few countries to gain unrestricted access to them. Mexico isn't looking at where the puck is going to be. They're too focused on the now. But let's unlock the next level of crazy, the final level of insanity we have seen over the past few days, and that is the US Hyundai mess. And by now, everyone knows what happened. The US conducted an ICE raid and deported over 400 Korean workers at a Hyundai battery plant based in Georgia. Make it make sense. Now, this is after Hyundai committed to spend nearly $6 billion in making a new steel plant in Louisiana by 2029. It's part of a larger $21 billion investment plan in the United States. Now, whoever advised Trump to raid the Hyundai facility just torpedoed any future deals. Not just with Korea, but other countries looking to shift production back to the US, they're going to be terrified 100%. It's really jarring. Now imagine you are working in the factory. You're just doing your own stuff, just a normal day. And suddenly you're taken away and deported all the way back to Korea. And how is that going to entice new investment into the US? Bringing workers from your home country isn't something new, guys. Companies like TSMC, they have to bring in their own engineers, they have to bring in their own specialists because there's simply not enough talent in the US. The numbers just aren't there. South Korea's president also gave a warning that a Hyundai rate could hit future investment into the United States. It's as clear as day what would happen. Trump is demanding Korea to fulfill their $350 billion investment pledge. But in all seriousness, is that even a good idea? The ICE rate basically scrambled the entire equation. Korea is planning to pour over $100 billion to rebuild US shipyards. And will that even materialize at this point? I am highly doubtful. Countries looking to ship production to the US are already facing higher costs of production. They won't be able to export their stuff out competitively. And now, they have to worry about ICE raids on their factories. This is some Twilight Zone stuff, and it's important to remember that the administration is fueled by immense amount of opium. They don't understand tariffs and they believe countries are paying for it.
And let me tell you who the experts are. Donald Trump and his trade team have proven the EU pays, Japan pays, Korea pays, Vietnam pays, the Philippines pay, Indonesia pays, and the list, by the way, we did like 5 deals. Donald Trump solved the war between Thailand and Cambodia.
I mean, just think about this. This is what's running trade policy. This is what's running the US administration. This is one half of the dream team next to Scott Bessent. The problem with this thinking plus the ICE rates is that countries like Japan or Korea will start to rethink their position. And there's one underlying worry. Is my investment in the US truly safe? And according to Hyundai themselves, the rate is going to delay the battery plant's construction. And this delay could stretch all the way to 3 months long. So big disruptions, higher costs, and zero production. And this is far from ideal when you're blowing billions to reshore production. Other countries, they are seeing this. Europe is witnessing this. And Japan is probably sweating as well. What other incidents could happen if we shift our factories or build new ones in the United States? And for Korea, they probably will try to reshuffle the investment pledge as well. Do they really want to inject money directly into the US? And that's taxpayer money after all. Korea expects only 5% of the $350 billion to be actual equity ownership in the investments. In other words, there are going to be loan guarantees, not really direct money going in. It's going to be credit to support local Korean companies involved in US projects. In addition, the Korean government won't blindly rubber stamp every single financing request that Trump wants. And this is in August, long before the Hyundai raids. So what is the possibility of the US getting all the money? Guys, it's slim to none, and Slim just left the building. Once again, the world has woken up to yet another own goal by Trump. Trying to get the world to reshore production is hard enough, but he's just making things even worse. It's a disaster. But let me know what you think. Will the US force NATO to punish China? Or will countries still feel safe investing in the US economy? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.